Hello everybody and welcome back to episode 6 of Surrounded by Bourbon with me, Phil Crawford, aka Causeway Whiskey, as I continue an Irishman's journey through the exploration of the wonderful world of American spirits. Today's topic is Four Roses Kentucky Straight Bourbon. So again, let's get a little bit of history about Four Roses. So this was founded by Rufus Rose in Atlanta, Georgia. But the Four Roses distillery and the whiskey actually wasn't trademarked until 1888 by a guy called Paul Jones Jr. He then actually went on to buy the Frankfort Distilling Company in 1922, which meant that Four Roses then had control over its own supply of whiskey. And actually this was kind of a good benefit to the brand because this allowed them to operate through Prohibition because they were able to sell their bourbon for medicinal purposes. So a pretty good scheme there, which we know that a few other distilleries availed of as well to keep production going through those testing times of Prohibition. Now, by 1943, 10 years after Prohibition had ended, Four Roses actually came under the ownership of Seagram's. And they actually kind of took a step where they actually, by the 60s, had removed Four Roses from the American market to focus on Europe and Asia. But they had also relocated the distillation from the Frankfort Distilling Company to Lawrenceburg in Kentucky. Now, one of the interesting things about the production, I'll go back. Four Roses didn't actually make it back onto the domestic American market again until 2004. So for the best part of 40 odd years, you couldn't buy this brand in America. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Personally, I came across Four Roses for the very first time when I went on holiday to Spain. I think it was about 2007. And I kind of wanted something different from the usual Jack Daniels or Jim Beam or whatever it was that I was drinking at the time. And I had never actually ever seen the Four Roses label. And I remember being kind of impressed with the bourbon back then. And that kind of got me interested, and I kind of wonder what else these guys make. So they do have kind of an extensive range. They have the small batch, they have small batch barrel proof, they also have single barrels. And so we'll touch on those later on as we go on through our journey through the Four Roses portfolio. But one of the interesting things about Four Roses is how they actually make their whiskey, because they have 2 different mash bills and they use 5 different proprietary yeast strains along with those mash bills to make 10 variations of style of their bourbon. And so every bourbon that they release, they actually will either have from one being maybe a single barrel release of those styles the whole way up to 10, of which this Four Roses entry-level bourbon contains all 10 variations. So to track these styles, they have a 4-letter code. The first letter is O, which means that it's Old Prentice. S means that it's a straight whiskey. Then they have the letters V, K, O, Q, and F for their yeast strains. And then for their mash bills, they use B and they use E. What's the difference in the mash bills? Well, mash bill B is 60% corn, it is 35% rye, and it is 5% malted barley. Mash bill E is 75% corn, 20% of the rye, and 5% malted barley. So no matter what sort of mixture of styles that they use in the bottle of bourbon that you get from Four Roses, this is considered a high rye bourbon. Anything that uses anything over 18% rye in the mash bill is considered high rye. And so that'll be interesting just to see how that comes through on the nose and on the palate. So enough about kind of the background, let's get into the tasting and the nosing, shall we? So if I describe this succinctly, I would say fruit, spice, and oak. That's a really nice nose, I'm going to say. So you're kind of immediately greeted with like vanilla cream. The caramel notes are ever present. There's peach in here. There's some orange slices as well. The rye definitely makes itself felt. You get like garden mint. There's also some light clove notes going through there. There's also some stone fruit like cherries as well. And then there's like a nice hint of like oak shavings, so it's not really super oaky. But there's enough there just to temper kind of the sweetness that's going on in the nose as well. But honestly, this is kind of one of, for an entry-level bourbon, this is something I could nose kind of all night. It's actually a really pleasant nose. So let's get into the taste, shall we, and see how that fares. So this is definitely a very approachable bourbon. Right away you get that caramel, vanilla cream sweetness. There's ripe apple, just a little touch of pear. There's a little peach in there as well. And then there's this like lovely gradual build up of spice from the rye. So you get like a nice peppery note. There's a bit of, we have them back home in Ireland, I don't know if you have them here, but it's a hard boiled sweet called clove rock. So like a very sweet clove taste. A bit of cracked black pepper going on too. And then kind of towards the back of the palate, that menthol kind of note comes through as well. And just like the right amount of oak. It's kind of quite a delicate oak, but it's just enough there to temper and balance everything that's going on. Finish wise, it's not the longest, it's a bit short, I would say. But again, you're kind of left with brown sugar and clove and just that kind of delicate oak that's kind of going on. So before I give my overall thoughts, I just want to have one more little sip of this. Very little to complain about here. For an entry-level bourbon, I think that this kind of delivers. This cost $20. I forgot to mention that it is 40% ABV, 80 proof, so I mean it's on the low end. But even at that, the proof, it still delivers like a lot of flavour. The nose is great. The palate marries up kind of to that as well. So it's not world beating in any stretch of the imagination, but this is something that you could easily sip on a daily basis, or you could use it in your cocktail base, especially with that high rye content. So I definitely would recommend having this on your shelf for $20. So this is definitely a whiskey score. What am I going to score it? Well, it is very simple, but it's very, very decent. So I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10. I think, as I say, it's not the most complex. It's a simple but solid whiskey, and I don't think there's really much to complain about, especially for the price. So I kind of can't wait to get into a bit more Four Roses. I have had a few of the single barrels in the past and I've always enjoyed them. So we'll see where that takes us whenever we get to that point. But looking forward to that. I don't think I've ever tried the small batch, so I'm kind of keen to see whether the small batch would be an upgrade on this. So we'll see how that pans out in the future. So instead of me warbling on and waffling, I'm going to say good night. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, leave a comment, tell me what you think, and have a great one. Sláinte.